Today, I'm pleased to welcome Mike Oppenheim to Cowboys Not Heads. Mike is the podcast host of a very interesting podcast that I kind of came across called Coffin Talk. And Coffin Talk explores our views on death and how they affect the way we live, which I think is very, very interesting. And he interviews people. He's got well over 200 episodes, so you're about twice as far as I am in this little journey. He interviews people from all ages and cultures to explore the meaning of death. So welcome, Mike. Appreciate you being on Cowboys Not Eggheads today.
Yeah, I'm excited, Sam. Thank you for having me on. And, speaking of the journey, that actually has been the most pleasant part of all of this is just meeting people like you and participating in this ecosystem of podcasting. It's really been eye-opening for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. So one of the things that Mike does, which I think is really interesting, he usually always the first question out of the bat is, how old are you and what generation are you from? So this is my second. We've kind of we're still on traditional podcast platforms, but we're now on YouTube as well, Mike. So for YouTube listeners, they can have the benefit of seeing what Sam is. I think you are a millennial. You're not. How old are you?
Well, it's funny. I was born in 1981, and as your shirt says, Gen X supposedly ends in 1980. Almost all my friends are older than me. I have obviously some friends who are younger, but I skew Gen X, my music, my opinions, kind of my attitude and all that. But I've also read and heard enough explanations to make me think it's all fake and it's all real. You know what I mean? So,
well, I think it's very real. And I never really got into this generational thing until, just recently, because I belong to a CrossFit gym, and there are about 3 Generation X people in there. And I'm always wondering, like, why am I doing so poorly? Well, because I'm in a class with people that are 25 or 35 years younger than I am. It's like, oh, you can't move like you used to be able to. And I also, during this podcast, have kind of explored this whole theme of I'm not a feeler person at all. And so I ask people, and so I'll ask you, do you feel, because I think it's part of my generation, but do you feel, do you think, do you know, or do you believe?
in
That's your first
generations,
question.
or yeah,
Just you, sir. You, sir.
oh, okay.
Do
I'm
you
a pretty
feel? Do you think?
emotional. Yeah, I'm a thinking first, feeling second, I would say.
Okay, well, you've got both. You've got both. That's good.
Yeah, I really do both. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if it's a generational thing or not, but I don't do the feel thing. I mean, in recent years, I've noticed, and I myself say it, you say it a lot on your podcast, is you'll say, what do you, or I feel this or I feel that. Like, people say, I feel like I need to tie my shoe. Like, what are you talking about? I mean, feel to me is more visceral. It's more, I touch a hot stove. That's feeling to me. I feel a hot stove. I'm going to remove my hand. I don't feel like I need to eat right now. I just know that I have to eat right now. So it's just a mindset, and I think it might be a generational thing. Well, I know it is. I mean, I've noticed young people. That's the way you communicate with. If you manage young people, you have to say, I feel like you aren't looking at this the way you should. And that's not in my generation. You would never. A manager would never say that to me.
So I taught linguistics, and I have a master's in language. And actually, what we're talking about is like soft approach and terse language. And so the phrase I feel is both generational, but it's also meant. It's like, can you open the window? Would you open the window? Do you see the difference? They're subtle.
Absolutely, and it drives me crazy, Mike.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. Yeah. Why be soft about asking you to?
Yeah.
I mean, just tell somebody to open the freaking window. See, to me, it's just I'm more of a direct, and this soft stuff that's to me, it's a sign that society is getting soft. But you got me off another tangent right now. We're not going to talk about
I like
that.
This. I want to ask you real quick.
Sure.
If your best friend was being held by gunpoint with someone, would you try soft language or hard language? Like, there's different times. Like, if you're dealing with a soft, whiny Gen Z guy, you might want to say feel because you want him to do something for you. It's like the goal is more important than your personal. And again, I'm not arguing with you. I'm explaining what I learned in those language programs. Yeah. Like, what I learned is that different people need different approaches to be coerced, and coercion, for like better or worse, or persuasion is a nicer word for it, is what I'm getting at.
Well, and I think if it's a friend of mine and I know them, if I were soft, they would think that I was inauthentic
Yeah, yeah. No, that,
immediately.
yeah,
They
yeah,
would expect me, if I were to be there and they want, they would expect me to be very direct with them. That's just the way people know me. And it's hard to get to know me because of that. But once you know me, you understand that with all that comes some other qualities, things like authenticity is important to me.
yeah.
Loyalty is very important to me, instilled to me at a very young age. But you can't just walk into my life and get loyalty. It takes a little time. So
Well, and that
interesting.
would be an example of feeling something. Loyalty is a feeling you have about someone. So
Touche.
yeah. So
Touche.
no,
A
I'm
very
really
a very
interested.
strong feeling.
A
Very
very strong
strong.
feeling, yeah. And if you have loyalty to someone and then they betray you, that feeling of betrayal becomes more important than the feeling of loyalty. So there's a lot of feelings in judgment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting
Yeah.
stuff.
This is stuff I love to think about and talk about, but I'm kind of with you. I'd rather be in a room with 20 hard asses than 20 soft approach. What the hell are you talking about? Just tell me what to do. Like, so I'm much
Yes.
more on your side
Be
of that.
direct.
Much more. Yeah.
Expectations. Tell
Yeah.
them. Tell.
Yeah. And that's what makes marriage hard for me.
Well, it makes marriage hard on my wife. I don't know about for me, but yes. Yes. Where did you come up with this idea of Coffin Talk? And I encourage listeners to check it out. I would say 90% of the podcast is you just talking like you and I are right now. And then you get to like the bottom line of it, which I think is an interesting approach. But where'd you come up with the idea for the pod?
Yeah, the podcast, it was my wife's idea, but it was from something I did. I did hospice care and a dementia ward for 4 years. And
Oh
in those
my
4 years, yeah,
goodness. You do feel, and
yeah,
bless
yeah.
you.
So
Bless
that was
you.
actually, ironically, a lot of people would say I'm good at hospice because I don't feel too much. Because when you're in that room, you have to control like your responses and reactions, and you don't try to be like glowy and happy, but you're.
How many people, I'm sorry to jump in, but I'm really interested. How many people did you see? I've seen two people pass away in person, and I believe it's something that everyone should go through. Um, it's a profound experience. It was my mother and my mother-in-law, and it was the most natural thing I've ever seen. I mean, it's very natural to me. It wasn't shocking. It wasn't scary. It wasn't. I didn't need a doctor to know that they weren't here anymore. It was just a very profound experience. So a lot of times in hospice, the family is there, but not always. Maybe somebody was alone, and if you were in a dementia ward, maybe it was a different deal. I mean, maybe you were the last one that they were with. How many times did you experience someone dying or
Yeah, that's a
see it?
great question. Yeah, I saw too many to count people who had already died, but the actual transition that we're talking about, that moment, I think I
Life to death.
actually, as a hospice person, only saw it once. I've seen it in other circumstances, but what you said is the most important thing I wish people would understand is you don't need a doctor to know if someone's dead or alive, and that should tell you a lot about how weird life is. Not like Christian, not Christian. I'm not getting into
Yeah.
any religion, but just like there is a thing that is not there when a person is dead, but when they're sleeping, it's there. And that's so creepy and weird and hard to explain to people. I don't know if creepy is the right word, but
It's an unusual experience that you have to experience yourself to understand what we're talking about.
yeah. And you're right about it being peaceful. It is, the approach isn't always peaceful. And that's where hospice is really a job, is like helping people calm down, especially family members. It's less likely to be the person dying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I didn't see a lot pass is just because protocol is that you step out of the room and let a family be in there
Right.
when,
Right.
yeah. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Right. Uh, so I'm sorry. I interrupted.
No, no, I like
The answer. You were so. I asked you why did you come up with the idea of the podcast, and you said that you're a
Oh
hospice
yeah,
nurse. And please
so I was doing
continue.
hospice, and the number one thing I learned in hospice is that both the people dying and the people visiting or with the person dying in America, this is very specific. It's a very taboo and weird thing to even talk about death. So I started seeing how silly that is. How like our culture has a lot of great standards to it, but one of the weirdest ones, I think this has ramped up in the last century, is we don't show like the dead bodies of soldiers since the Vietnam War. Like we don't show people death or talk about it. We like tell children we took your dog to a farm. Like it's lying in my opinion. It's strange and it's not. Speaking of direct, it's very indirect in our culture how we talk about death. They passed. Oh, it's been many years since they left us. Oh, well, she's up there looking down on me. Like all of these vague euphemisms are like kind-hearted and well-intended, but they are a disaster at the end of life. So I wanted to prepare people by doing a podcast where I just get normal people to talk about A, how often they do or don't think about death, B, what they think about it, and C, how that does or doesn't affect their life. So the reason I go in a weird order is I like to see what their life was like. And then I like to ask them, and then I like to see if there's something to that. But usually that's the thing I leave my audience with is I'm not going to judge for you. I'm going to let you, you know. But it's interesting to hear a cop talk about how much they respect life, and then to hear someone who hates the police talk about how much they respect life. And like, it's kind of weird when you start to see that all of us are really similar. And your show is titled accurately. People think they're cowboys or eggheads, but most of us are some combination. You know,
We're in between. Yeah, most of us are in between, and yeah, most of us are in between. I'd just rather be a little. If I had the choice between one more cowboy in the world or one more egghead, I'd rather have one more cowboy. Um, have you ever experienced profound grief in your life?
yeah, it's a really bummer of a story, so I will warn you and your audience. But my ex-wife abducted my son, so I experienced it every day of my life. Yeah, I miss my son, and I did nothing wrong. It's illegal. The State Department knows, and there's nothing I can do. So
Oh, he's alive, but the grief is from the law.
the grief is from not raising him, and I don't get to see him, and it's very controlled by the family, and it's just, again, it's a much longer story, and it's not that I'm don't want to tell it. It's just such a bummer for most people.
Well, it's interesting when I say the word grief, you went to a loss, not necessarily to death, but to a loss.
Yeah,
That's really interesting because I've kind of experienced in both ways myself. And I think it's the people that are alive. It's tougher,
yeah, yeah. I
honestly,
totally with you. Yeah.
because they're alive, but they're not here anymore. But it's interesting. Interesting. Um, what is the meaning of death? You've talked to 30 some people. What is the meaning of death? Is it changed since you've had your podcast, or what do you think it is? What does it
I didn't.
evolve to?
Yeah, I didn't have one going in, but I can definitely say the synopsis I would make. Like overall, if I aggregate all of the opinions, I would say all of us want to not know when we're going to die. All of us want to live a long life, but none of us want to live forever. So the meaning of death is probably creating a time crunch feeling, which makes you have to make hard decisions about what you do and don't want to do with your life, and how much you do or don't want to hold a grudge, be angry, hate people, get mad at politics, get mad at your in-laws, you know what I mean? Like the list is endless, but there's a tipping point, and mostly older people are on it where they're kind of tired of being angry, tired of being upset. Like it's a burden to carry anger with you. Like that's something I've really learned from this podcast. Like I let go of the anger to the people who are like with my son because there was no point to it, and it was just killing my ability to be happy, to enjoy music, to like fall in love again, date, trust people, have more children, which I do have more now. And like, so I've learned a lot just talking to people, especially like people who came back from war or people who like had some really, adverse, we don't all, most of us have a really messed up thing happen to us at some point in our life. It's just, and when it is so random in my opinion.
Well, that's how you handle it. Is how you come out on the other side, and clearly that's what this is all about. A couple observations. One is I have a little joke, and that is that the only one that wants to be 100 is the 99-year-old,
A lot. That's good.
and the and the other is my wife's grandfather is in his 90s now, and I think he's 93 this year. This Halloween, I think he's coming up to be 93 years old, and he's doing okay. He doesn't have a cane. He walks and he gets around and he lives by himself at night. I mean, can you imagine living by yourself at 93 years old? Just to have the capability of doing that, to be in that kind of shape and so forth, and mental clarity and being able to do all the things. And I asked him the last time I saw him, I said, Papa, if you could live to be 200, would you? And he told me, he said, I would. If I had enough money, I would. And I just thought that was an incredible answer. Because to me, if I'm in my knees, it probably means that most of my friends have been gone for 20, 25 years. Everybody's gone. And there wouldn't be, so what is your perspective going to be, once you're older? And I just thought it was a fascinating answer. He said, well, if I had enough money, I'd want to live 200. Wow. Just,
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
It is the part of me that never wants to die is this part of me that watches movies. It's like the part of me that even if a movie's bad, I might not get up and leave. Like there's just a compulsion with storytelling for me, and the story of like the human spectacle. Like I can start the story anywhere. I can start it with like Egyptians and pyramids. I can start it with Napoleonic Wars. Like it doesn't matter where. There's a compelling drama going on. I'm a part of it. You're a part of it. Right now, we're talking on what, March 6th? Like, America is the most publicly crazy it's ever been in my life. I was born in 1981. I've never seen this much public craziness. I've felt it, I've noticed it, but like, the consensus is all of us disagree, but the feeling I have, like, to go back to that, isn't that. So there's like a mismatch right now. So I want to keep seeing it because I want to see how
Well,
this
I
ends.
want I want you to put that into proper perspective, and we're not going to get
Sure.
into politics in here.
No. Yeah.
I mean, did you know that members of Congress have killed each other in the 1800s? Did you know that?
I
Did you
knew
know
of
that
it.
between the years
Yeah.
there's a book I'll find it, but I think it's called The Blood Years or something. But they're members of Congress used to cane each other. I mean, like put guys in the hospital for months. And so I think from a historical standpoint, we have to evaluate, is it really as divisive as we think it is? I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the 24/7 media blows things up into proportions that are that aren't. That's why people tune out to the media. They're
Hmm.
not trustworthy anymore because you can shop for the news that you want. For instance, like if I'm on this side of the aisle, I can go to this channel or this cable station and get this, and vice versa. And now they're reinforcing what I already think, and that makes it's a crazy time. And I just think that before the 24/7 news cycle where you had to fill an hour, now you have to fill every hour, every minute of something. It's become the system now where, yeah, it's divisive and it's blown up, but it's always been divisive. America is always going to be, we are a free society, and it's just, that's the way it is. And so I agree with you. Most people, they don't, they get turned off by it because it doesn't really have anything to do with day-to-day life.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, you may not know it, but maybe people that you do business with or are on the complete opposite side of the political aisle. But yet, if we're off social media and we're just talking on a Riverside chat, or if we're just talking one on one, we're never gonna talk that viscerally to one another. We'll have a discussion and we might disagree on some things, but I don't think it's worth it. I just to all this,
Yeah. No. Yeah, I'm with you.
it's
I'm totally with you.
and that's part of this journey of towards towards the end of our life. I just think it's a decision you've got to make. So, Mike, what do you personally? And I'm a Christian. And it's been pretty stated, we talk about heaven a lot on this podcast. I have a pretty clear vision of what I think happens after you die, and not everybody. I interviewed somebody who believes that it's like a light switch. It's just you're dark. That's it. That's the end of it. But I don't believe that. What do you believe is going to happen when we die?
I don't have a belief, and I never have, but I do have a understanding of how strange it is to go to sleep every night and wake up every day. Sometimes remember where I was, sometimes not. Sometimes remember parts of where I was, but not the whole thing. I also can't figure out if the person in all my dreams is me or if I play different people in my dreams. I think that is a sign pointing towards what happens when I die. I think that my where I am and who I am will switch, but with the same naturalness as I switch between dream and this. But that doesn't mean heaven doesn't exist because heaven is like a dream. It literally sounds like a dream, right? All the people you love are there,
A
whatever age you
very
happen to
good
be.
dream, the
A
best
very good
dream you could
dream.
possibly have.
Yeah. So it's
Imagine,
not.
I can't play guitar, but I envision I'll be just spotless in heaven. I mean, I don't. There are many things I don't have the answers to, but wouldn't it be awesome to have answers to some things you don't have answers to right now, and it would make sense to me? That's heaven.
And that so and I really, really think this. I think that our belief system and how we imagine it will have to do with it. I just somehow do think that. I think that there's uh, like you could have a dream tonight where you're with everyone in heaven. right? Like easily that could happen to you. And you could wake up tomorrow and you could tell someone, wow, I had the best dream ever last night. It was so realistic. I was there, my mom was there. She wasn't how she looked when she passed. She was actually like how I remembered her when she was 45, but she had all the memories from when she was 90. Like her, and she'd been there since I died, and she knew this thing, and we were able to look down at these children that we love, and and there's nothing unrealistic or like that couldn't happen to me. So that's why I'm not anti or against anything. I'm also not convinced though that this is real. Like this is only as real as every day I wake up and it's real. Like it's here every day when I wake up. But how do we, if you die in your sleep, do you know you died in your sleep? These are all questions that haunt me. So, but I do think that there's something beyond me that isn't gonna die, and I do feel connected to that. That's the most I can answer that question.
Are you afraid to die?
Not at all, but because I have children, I absolutely don't want to die while they're this young because I would
Right,
feel terrible for
right,
what would happen to them. Yeah.
right.
So I'd like to beg for my life.
Have you made one of the things that my wife and I don't have children, but we've had an estate plan for many years. Like what would happen? I mean, there are obviously people that are close to us that are gonna get some assets. But have you made plans for your own death? Do you have a will and a last testament?
No, I don't have anything, but it's entirely laziness. My wife is pretty upset that I don't. She wants to do it
Well,
right
good for her. Good for
now.
her. Listen to
So,
her.
yeah, I'm 43. It's time. I should get one.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know. I mean, I don't know. As you said before, we don't know when our number's up, and we don't want to know our number's up. But our number will be up, and it could be tomorrow. So I would encourage you, a little PSA, I would encourage you to do that.
No, and I appreciate it. Thanks. Seriously.
I think it's very important. I mentioned earlier, do you think all of our unanswered questions are answered in the afterlife?
That's a really good question. It would depend on if a question could have an answer. Because, for example, like I'm reading this book right now called Noise by this famous author, Daniel Kahneman. So this is the part of the interview. But what's interesting about the book is it's about how we make judgments and how we evaluate judgments, and how usually we're looking at the wrong things when we make a judgment. Like instead of looking at were we accurate, we should look at were we fair and reasonable in coming to the judgment. Like did we, do like you should make the same how you make all decisions should be the same. You shouldn't make some decisions with more thought than others. This book is, like I said, it's an ed book, but it's making sense to me as I read it. And it actually makes this point. It says some things will never be known because they're value judgments, and value judgments don't have a definitive answer. So was it right to go to war or wrong? It's impossible to know that. So that's the kind of thing that no, I don't think we can know. What I do think is going to make sense is how you can see the world so clearly your way, and I can see it so clearly my way, and how even though that would mean one of us has to be wrong, that's not true. That's the one thing I think will come true when I die is you'll be able to see how it's possible for so many people to see it so differently, which explains chaos, war, and just all these disagreements we have.
It'll all make sense, or it'll be
Yeah, yeah.
understandable.
Yes,
It'll all
understandable.
make
It
sense.
all makes sense. Yeah, I
It all
really
makes
do think
sense.
that
Yeah, I agree.
conflict will make.
We share that. I 100% believe that. Do you think our cultural experiences influence our perceptions of death?
Yeah, more than anything, probably. Even more than family, because family really only works until you enter culture, right? And you enter culture depending on, unless you're homeschooled. Like, there's rare cases. Homeschooled in a small tribe, disconnected from electricity, you're going to be more connected to your family than your culture. But if you're in like America or any other normal country right now, like I would say 98% of us, uh, you immediately start participating in a larger culture, and that culture informs you of life and death, religion, morality. This old like debate of like how is it okay for a tribe in Africa to generally mutilate their children, and then meanwhile you're like, by the way, I had my kid circumcised at the hospital. Like that's the same thing. There's no difference. So culture is what informed both of those. Culture told you that it's wrong to mutilate children that way in Africa, and culture told you it's okay to circumcise. And so that's like a good example of why I do believe absolutely culture is like, it's hard to, when you want to break from culture or when culture is breaking from you, that's a scary feeling. COVID was like that for everyone, no matter who you are. COVID was this example of like oh my God, like I thought the monoculture had an opinion. I thought my subcultures had an opinion, but we don't. Like we're so fractured on how to deal with the existential threat. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
obsessed how existential that is.
Yeah. Well, that's how this podcast was born. Was out of COVID. I didn't. And if we maybe go down that road here a little bit,
Yeah,
if
I'm
you're
comfortable
comfortable.
with I'm comfortable with any subject because I just am comfortable with all subjects. It's fine. I
Okay.
can do
Well,
all.
I mean, I started this podcast out of at first I mean, clearly it was a humongous concern because what the media was showing us, what the media was telling us was that there are whole blocks of people in China that are being wiped out by this thing, decimated. And it's very contagious. And that's what will happen if it gets to America. Well, it got to America and holy moly. But after a bit of time, I was really interested as to how different people and people that I know and love, people that I did business with, business partner, whatever, how differently they treated or their reaction to this. And to me, I could not one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, a friend of mine from Australia who was a dear friend, and I consider a dear friend. We were roommates in high school at a private boarding school. He's lived in Australia for 25, 30 years, and he said that Americans are selfish and we all just need to lock down. Because in Australia, that's what they
Yeah,
literally
totally.
locked down. Like they
Totally.
had an hour a day to do exercise, and that was for months at a time.
Yeah.
And I basically, the comment on social media that I had to him was basically, listen, he was like, you got to give hospitals a break, this, that, and the other. And my thought was at the time, well, listen, you know, uh, during calving time for cowboys, they're busy. During accounting time for CPAs, they're busy. And during a pandemic, hospitals are busy. And he said that I was basically didn't have a soul, I didn't have a heart, and he defriended me on social media. I haven't heard from him since, which breaks my heart. I mean, it's like wow. And so at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was stirring about this, and I said, why am I such a cowboy and he's such an egghead? And I just couldn't
Well,
believe that the fear that people face fear differently.
uh-huh.
And I'll be honest, I don't think this is the first time I've said this on this podcast. I really thought that your internal beliefs about is there a God or is there somebody else bigger than us? If you believe that, then you're probably not quite as afraid. But
Hmm.
if you believe that death is the final, that the lights are out on death, man, I would have been scared I would have been also would have reacted the same way. Now I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but that's my observation. How was the pandemic for you? I mean, I'm in Omaha, Nebraska. We're a metropolitan area, and it's not much different than Phoenix. How did the pandemic go for you? How did you react? What were your feelings? What were your feelings during the pandemic? And looking at your like maybe potential demise.
Well, so my story is like very strange because it's about like the order of finding out about it. So I read a lot of like market analysis papers for like the stock market, and I'm not an investor. It's just a weird hobby I picked up in my early 20s. I can't explain it. I just feel like the economy predicts a lot of things in culture, so I like to like see what's going on. Also, like the economy is a better predictor of like what president will win an election and things like that. So I just got interested in my 20s, and this had nothing to do with college. I didn't major in anything like that. But my point is, because I read those, I knew about a virus in China in like November of 2019. And I knew that it was a big deal. I knew for sure it was going to start causing airport closures and weird things like that. Our government intentionally, and I think for good reasons, did not play it up because you're not supposed to stir paranoia and fervor about it. So, with that
Well,
said,
you can't handle the truth is a real thing.
yeah, exactly.
Panic and chaos is never going to do anybody any good.
No, panic is the worst thing ever. I support governments that try to temper panic. I don't support governments that suppress news just because they can use the excuse of panic. And that's always hard. This goes back to like decision making. But I do see the actual like for example, I don't think it would have been smart to tell everyone who killed Kennedy 3 days after his assassination. I think that probably would have been a horrible decision. So even though I hate the
Can't
fact that
handle
that's
the
revealed,
truth. I
yeah,
agree.
I just think like, and also like we saw what happened when Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated and people didn't know it was by a Serbian. It caused World War I. So like Yeah, so that's like a small example of why I thought COVID was handled the way it was. But the reason it's interesting is I first heard about that, but then my brother's a public school teacher in New York City. So he also started saying, dude, there's something going around and these kids are calling in sick and I'm going to get it. And this is like March 5th or something. Meanwhile, my wedding was February 20th, 2020.
Wow.
Or sorry, February 16th. So we had a bunch of people come, but two people didn't come. They said, I've heard about this pandemic because they lived in Seattle. And I was like, oh, that's so weird. Like, I'm not going to mention this to the other guests, but I know what they're talking about.
Well, I
And
had
then,
a very close friend that worked in the healthcare system in Seattle. So I was in his. It sounds like you were 4 months ahead of it. I was maybe a month ahead of it or 2 months. But go ahead.
well, I wasn't like ahead. I would just say that I
You knew
canceled
it
a
was
trip.
coming.
Yeah, March 7th, I was supposed to go to a friend's 40th birthday party in California. I canceled. She told me this is really low. Like, I can't believe you're doing this. I just came after your wedding. You're canceling this to see me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but like, I got too little, like, or no, it's not true. I didn't have too little. Anyway, no. And then she called me 3 weeks later and said, you made the best call ever. I can't believe how silly it was to have that party. We all could have gotten like so sick, blah, blah, because people were flying from all over. So my point is, how did I handle COVID? I sat at home and thought, I hope that we're peaceful. And then I sat at home and watched us not be peaceful. And so for me, COVID was just a giant like reiteration of what I've noticed since I was a kid, which is I'm not afraid of much and I'm a peacekeeper, but I live among people who don't seem to want peace. And so I learned how to keep my mouth shut and how to not make enemies and how to not be friends with people I don't like, but how to get along with them. And I think that's a skill. And I'm disappointed in my country. I'm very sad that we not only don't have that skill, but we have no interest in teaching it to children. And it sucks. Like cowboys know how to get along with each other. So do eggheads. Like it's weird that this split started. I'm also sorry about your friendship thing, and I'm also sorry that that conversation was on social media because that's part of
Yeah.
the issue. Is like it should have been in person on Friday. And not critiquing you. I've had it happen too. Like,
No.
why do we
No.
talk to close people?
I've done that twice. I violated my own rule where, well, actually,
Yeah, yeah,
he came in on my stuff and started commenting like, "You're wrong. You're an idiot." Like, well,
yeah,
I never try and do that on somebody else. If they have an opinion, I just, hey, okay, I know what your opinion is now. I'm not going to tell everybody in the world that I think you're an idiot.
yeah.
That's
So
what
I don't know
social
if
media does.
overall, I'm not a big fan of like I believe in doctors and I believe in medicine, but I also just like to like let my own system deal with stuff. So I didn't like the pressure about vaccines. I didn't like any of the conversations about it. I felt coerced in the last 8 years more than ever in my life about what to believe in, who to vote for, and what science is. Like I really don't like how this has become device. Like the way it's your podcast has the perfect name. And it really is weird. Like
Well, I
I just
trademarked it, so
yeah, it's
I thought
cool.
so. I think
I
so.
dig it. It's like weird because it would be smart if you're going on like the Oregon Trail. It'd be smart to bring a bunch of cowboys, but it would also be really stupid not to consult an egghead about
You
weather
better
and
believe
stuff.
it.
Yeah, so like I see your wisdom, I really do, and it's like interesting that we are so. And also like no one should want to be 100% a cowboy or 100% an egghead. You should try to be balanced a little bit. You know, it's okay if you're balanced this way or that way, but like
We
there's
we
still
call
to
I
the.
call the perfect mix of 50-50 veterinarians and astronauts.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's
Now, if
cool.
you're neither one, Mike, if you're neither a cowboy nor an egghead, you're just a guest on Jerry Springer's show.
Yeah. So yeah, COVID was it was the wild wild west. It was weird.
Yeah,
It's still weird.
weirdest period of my entire life. I mean, I started a podcast. I retired. You know why? Because I could, and I did. I mean,
Yeah, that's awesome.
it was a crazy time. Crazy time. Now maybe back to the subject, huh? But
Mhm.
this is interesting how where people where they're coming from. Can you share a memorable story? I mean, obviously you've talked to 200. You have 236 episodes or something like that.
I don't really, I'm not sure, but yeah, like
Well into the 200s, but you've talked to well over 200 people that you don't even necessarily know. Like you and I didn't know each other before today, which actually is a very congratulations. This doesn't happen very much on this particular podcast, but can you share a memorable story from your podcast? I mean, obviously you've heard tons of them, but one that maybe actually impacted you.
yeah. I mean, I might get laughed out of the room, but I don't care. It did impact me more than any other. I think it's episode number 56, but his name is Christian Sundberg. And I always tell people if you're going to listen to one episode of mine,
Go to
this
that
is
one.
the one Not because you're going to like my show and you're going to want to subscribe. If anything, it's the opposite. It's probably the least like any of my other ones. But this guy is just a different guy. He hates talking about what he goes and talks about all the time, but he reluctantly has prenatal memories. He remembers where he was before he was born. He remembers being, yeah, and the way he tells it, it's
Whoa.
cold and without pride and without like I want attention, and I just believe him. I just do. Like it's hard to explain why you believe someone or not, but there's a way he goes about it. He also wrote a book about it and doesn't charge money for it. Like there's nothing that I can perceive or find out about him that would show me that it's a big long-term con. Like he has no cult, he has no following, he's hard to reach. Booking him on my show was actually hard. It wasn't easy. He vetted me. He wanted to make sure that I was interested in helping other people. He said I have no interest in like, and then like I said, he didn't like his story, but his story was, I love explaining it my way. It's not his way, but I'll make it really fast. But most people listening in your audience have probably watched The Price is Right. And The Price is Right has this game called Plinko, where you drop a chip and then it bounces like crazy and then it ends
Yeah.
up in one of like 6 holes. He said before you come to Earth, it's like Plinko, and you make a general like outline of what could happen, but then as soon as you're on Earth, free will is the Plinko. So in other words, it's predetermined the Plinko board. So like if you're born a 5'3" Jewish, like if you're born a person who's going to be a 5'3" Jewish man, you're clearly not going to play in the NBA, right? Like NBA would be like this much possible. So like the Plinko board, like so that's what he said. He said like we are governed by prenatal decisions as far as like the possibilities in our life. But then every time you make a decision, and it's not about whether it was good or bad, it closes off part of the possibilities. And that just starts happening from the moment you're born on. And he said, all of us are here for the same reason, but none of us are here with the same understanding of that or ability to like decide. So you're just supposed to pay attention, not to feelings. He didn't use that word, but to whatever that thing is that makes you a Christian and makes me whatever the hell I am. Like that, the intuition is the word I use just because I'm comfortable with it. But
Yeah.
intuition is not a feeling, even though we say a gut feeling. Like intuition is not a feeling. Feelings are emotions, like anger, rage, sadness, right? But intuition is like a instructive.
To me, it's my gut. That's where I feel
Yeah,
things. It's like a gut, like you feel it in your gut. It was a gut decision. That makes sense to me. Like I feel it from my heart doesn't make sense to me. My chest doesn't get tight. My gut gets upset. So that to me, that's intuition.
I'm totally with you. Now let's reverse engineer that real quick because I wanted to ask
Yeah,
you this earlier. So
it's the same, by the way. Yeah,
when you knew it was your wife to marry and not those other girls, was that a feeling or was that intuition or was it both? Was it your heart or your gut or both?
probably one of the most profound questions I've ever been asked. And here we are live on the air. I think probably 50-50, to be honest with you.
And that's the meaning of life to me, right there. That's it. That's like what I
How
would say
about
is the
you?
meaning
How
of life.
about you?
Yeah,
Same thing? A little bit of both?
it was definitely. Well, here's the thing: I've been married twice, right?
Yeah.
First time, I would have told you both. I was wrong.
But it
Second
probably was
time,
more from here, wasn't it? The first time was probably
yeah,
more from here. I'm pointing my heart, listeners, for those that are
yeah,
not on YouTube.
definitely. It was. Yes, I agree with you. It was. The first time was like all my friends were growing up, and I felt like I wasn't growing up. They were all having kids. I wanted kids. This person's good. I like her. We get along. She makes me laugh. But it wasn't enough of the gut, like you said. It wasn't enough.
My dad used to say, he'd say, when you're 20 years old, or, somebody gets married young, he'd say, when you're 20 years old, you don't know who the hell you are, let alone the other person. And there's some truth to that, huh?
Totally. So yeah, to me, like that episode, Christian Sandberg is like just life changing
Oh,
because
I'm
I
going to
can't,
download immediately. Yeah.
I can't shake it. I read his
Well,
book,
I
and yeah,
believe that. Like, what are the chances that you and I, like, I assume you're a Jewish guy and you're from Berkeley, California, right? Go Raiders! But that's the one thing we might have in common is the Raiders. Well, are you? That what they say. You date a Raiders girl and marry a Niners girl. But anyway,
uh,
but what are the chances that you and I are talking on this podcast today? I mean, it's insane. I was born and raised on a ranch in Cherry County, Nebraska. Okay, Mike. Cherry County has 5,000 square miles. Okay, and there are 4,200 people that live there. Okay. and that's not where you come from at all. And like, here we are having a great conversation, and the universe is just one big Plinko board. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
It was
That's
really
fantastic.
cool. And I read his book and I can't shake it because it just is like wise. It's like there's a wisdom to seeing. And again, I said this earlier in a different form, but just admit you don't understand how that person can have their opinion, but also admit that it's possible they're right and you're wrong, and it's possible you're right and they're wrong, and it's possible you're both wrong. But like, that would get rid of so much conflict on Earth.
Yeah, it would. Well, more people have got to learn.
I agree.
Learn.
Well, man,
Cowboys learn too, Yeah. Do you think our views of death, and I think you've kind of already answered this, but let's discuss this a little bit more. Do you think our views of death change as we age?
for some people, yes, and for some people, no. And I would say uh, it's a really good question because I, gosh, it's like it's weird because I think sometimes people have a fake opinion of death, and then I think people have a real one, and I think some people are afraid to share, and other people aren't. I think I'm very good at getting people to admit the real one, and that's part of why I interview the way I do. Is I have to build trust and rapport with a stranger on a weekly basis. So I have to like, I mean, sometimes I interview friends, but it's so it's like I feel like a lot of people are lying to themselves, and then I feel like when you're in a situation where, like, I had a cancer scare when I was 18, I was in a really bad car accident, and I thought I was going to be paralyzed, and like,
Wow.
these are run-ins with like fate. I think
Flirting,
challenge us.
flirting,
Yeah,
flirting with death.
like I was told by the State Department not to book a ticket and travel to the country and try to get my son back myself. Like they warned me severely, and I remember like being like, "Well, that's crazy. It's my son. Like I have to go." And I remember like thinking, and somehow it like made sense to stay alive and wait for him to come back. Like it just made more sense than like risking that. And I know it's like not about life and death, but to me that is about life and death because it's living with myself is the hardest part of making decisions like that, you know? Like getting mad at your spouse is different from getting a divorce, you know? Getting a divorce is like it was one of the worst experiences of my life, one of the three worst. And yet it wasn't like financially that wasn't the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, it would take a toll for sure. For sure. How does discussing death improve the quality of our life?
Immensely and always. It never hurts it. It always helps it because having more experience with talking about how precious life is with other people and why it's precious to them helps us see how precious it is, which makes it harder to like wish death on someone or be okay with like large amounts of people being like eradicated. You know, I think that Stalin quote is so accurate. One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. That's why we can sleep at night knowing chaos is going on throughout the world. It would be horrible to care about every death. It would be impossible. So death has to happen, but caring about the quality of someone's life and how they die should also matter. So I think it's good to think about this. I think soldiers and police officers and other people in law enforcement, while they may get a bad rep for like bitterness and behavior and stuff like that and how they treat family members and stress and PTSD, I still think that they get something out of those careers that a lot of us could get. Like that it should be more normal to see how sad it is when people die. Because I think even law enforcement, like, again, I'm excluding like the stupid examples people want to argue about, but the average law enforcement person who's had to kill someone for a legit reason, they never feel good about it and they have to seek
Not very many.
counseling and it's not easy, you know?
No, they
Like,
won't do it. Well,
yeah.
for full disclosure, I was a police officer for 13 years.
Well, there you go. So what the hell am I
You're,
telling someone like you about that?
no,
So
you're absolutely right. Right. It's a tough job. People wonder why cops are so cynical and so forth. It's because you're getting lied to every single day. People lie to you every single day. I mean, it's just it's impossible not to get cynical. But yeah, that's
I was a teacher,
we can
just
have a whole.
watching people lie about tests and shit and stuff was equally like it's disappointing to see regularly the uglier underbelly side of people. Like does that
Yeah,
resonate?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And it's hard. It's hard not to. It's hard on you. I don't care if you're a teacher, if you're a cop, or whatever. Nobody wants to be lied to. Nobody wants to be cheated on. I mean, all those things. Yeah,
and it must
absolutely.
really. I can't imagine what it's like to be I have friends, in law enforcement, obviously, because I'm talking about it the way I am, but I am not. I've never been. And one of the saddest things multiple of them have told me about is when you find someone on the force isn't like doing the job honorably and how to deal with that, whether to go to internal affairs, how to go to internal affairs, like the code, the brotherhood. I mean, these are like really complicated issues. I mean,
Yes,
I
they
can't
are.
imagine what that's like.
Yeah, yeah. We could do a whole podcast on that, honestly.
Well, I kind of want to have you on my podcast and talk to you about the other side of all this. So if you're willing, I would love to.
Anytime, anytime.
Cool. All right.
I'm
I'll
enjoying our
email.
conversation. I'll have another one with you.
Awesome.
Ultimately, what advice, Mike, would you give someone who struggles with their own mortality?
I hate the way the word got co-opted by like people who want to make money, but learn how to meditate. But what I mean by that, because I want to make it clear to people, is meditation is when you only listen and you don't talk. So praying is like talking and speaking to God. Meditation is listening to God. So it doesn't matter what you do to get in that state, but it's called flow state. And everyone's felt flow state. We all know that feeling. It's when time goes by and you don't know it went by, but you were somewhere else and yet here, and you feel like confident and happy with the results. That's a meditative state. And if you learn how to meditate, you will not fear mortality the same way, because meditation gives you like a feeling of safety and safeness that is the same feeling I believe you're going to feel when you actually die. Not when you're diagnosed with cancer, not when you're in the hospital. I'm not talking about that, but that moment you've seen. And I would love to ask you this either on my podcast or now, even when it's like, because again, I don't like to ask law enforcement specific questions. I feel like it's
Well, you
rude.
go
But
ahead. You can ask me anything. It's a
if you've
conversation.
seen some guy bleeding out on the street before, even if he was an a-hole, there still is like something going on with that death. And like, I think that mortality has to do with that, like.
Yeah. Well, you're sworn to protect, just like doctors are sworn to heal. I mean, you have to take all that out of it,
Yeah.
So
So I think that meditation, but again, not like download an app and I don't care about that crap. I care about whatever it takes for you to stop talking out and just listen. And when you listen, you're going to hear your mind at first. That's the first awful part of meditation. That's why people quit and hate it. But if you persevere and you don't quit, that stops. The chatter stops. And that's when you're meditating. And it is a great experience if you want to not fear mortality specifically, I would say.
fantastic. Well, March, our theme is sort of survival, and I think you just gave a fantastic tactic to survival.
Awesome.
Great. Is there anything we haven't covered today, Mike, that I need to, or any question that you might have of me? You've been fantastic. I've asked you some tough questions.
I do have a question for you. It just came to me. It wasn't planned. Who is an egghead you admire?
Oh, there are lots of them. Let's see. Let me think about that. Egghead that I admire.
Like currently, so not someone from the past.
Okay. I think my cousin Jillian Watts. She's been on my podcast several times, and she's striving to be a cowboy, but she is so wicked smart. Learning is very natural for her, and you can just tell she's extraordinarily smart. I mean, she can put a couple sentences together, she can articulate, and she goes to great lengths to articulate. And she's a Spanish teacher. She's a Spanish teacher of like seventh graders. Like, you got to be smart if you can pull that off, right? I mean, that's a terrible age, and you're teaching them another language. I think my cousin Jillian, my second cousin Jillian Watts, is an egghead that I admire. She has her own show out there, folks. It's called The Jillian Show. She'll just sit there and talk about stuff for 48 minutes on her own. It's just a single show. I mean, it's like, how many people can you do that? Can you sit there and talk for 48 minutes on a subject? I can't. No way.
Yeah, that is a real thing.
And keep people's attention. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. The second part is the harder part.
But I wouldn't say she's 100% egghead, but she's always curious. She's got a thirst for knowledge, and she retains knowledge. It's very natural for her. So, I mean, there's your answer.
That's cool. I like it. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, cool. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. This has been great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And anyone who wants more, I got a website.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. I always do that. Gee, Merry Christmas.
Oh, I don't care at all.
Yeah, go ahead.
My wife's an entrepreneur. She's like,
yeah.
I'm like, I actually don't like talking about myself, so I was just making it quick. MikeyOpp.com, MikeYopp.com. It's a website.
You said that so fast, I think you have to say it again, Mike.
MikeYopp.com. It's MikeYopp.com. My name's Mike
Cowboys
Oppenheim.
understand that speed.
Yeah,
Good.
and I do a lot of stuff. I do essays, I do fiction, I do podcasts, I do films, I do music, I do a lot. So if you're interested, please head over there. That's all.
Cool. Appreciate it.
And I can't wait to have you on my show. So I'll send you
Oh
an
yeah.
email to. Yeah, that's gonna be awesome.
Sounds good.